2 decades later, Herb Swanson began to tell the story at dinner parties. He knew every inch of the trivia. He knew that the forgotten movie star who burned to death that night was named Buck Jones. Nowadays, people don't know the guy from Adam, Herb would say. But back then, Buck Jones, no joke, was big as Gene Autry. Herb knew that the final death toll was 492, including the 5 firemen, not 474 like some accounts still claim. Herb knew that the name of the busboy who struck the match to start the greatest conflagration in the history of Boston. To this day, you can't call a business Coconut Grove within Boston city limits, not even if you sell coconuts, was named Stanley Tomaszewski. Wretched Stanley Tomaszewski. He'd been trying to change a bulb. He needed light to see better, and so he lit a match. The ceiling caught. Then Herb would lower his voice and say in a whisper coated with breathy awe, "Listen, it's just after 10. Roe and I are upstairs in the dining room, and Mickey Alpert's just launched into the first chords of the Star Spangled Banner. You got palm trees and pina coladas all over the place. It's corny, but you buy it. There's glamour in that kind of nonsense. And you're out in the town with your girl, and you're thinking, this is it. This is what it comes down to, seeing and being seen. You remember? You're young. You can't imagine anything other than being young. And the music and the drinks and the waiters spitting through the crowd with trays hoisted over their heads. When it. But you see, Herb would always hustle past the actual fire part of the story. What mattered when Herb told the Coconut Grove was the great aftermath. The courage of the firemen, the heroics of the policemen, how the people of Boston joined together in the face of such a disaster. Beautiful thing amid all that incalculable horror. It even prepared people, Herb would say, for what was to come soon enough, with our boys being sent back from France wrapped in the flag. Still, Herb couldn't completely ignore the fire itself. His credibility depended on it, the almighty fact of his and Rosalie having been there, having survived it. Got lucky. Our number wasn't up, simple. Our table was near one of the few exits that didn't get blocked up with people right away. We were the 4th couple out the door. For years, Rosalie never said anything when Herb told the story, and this too gave it a mystique. It was painful for her to talk about, to remember. Yet at some point, when both of them were well into their 60s, as Herb continued to rattle on about flammable ceiling material and how the biggest problem from a fire safety perspective was that the few exit doors opened inward, how there were no sprinklers, how 4 brothers from the little hamlet of Wilmington, Massachusetts, all died in it, and the town put a statue of them up on the green. Rosalie began to enter the story with her own details, quietly first. She talked about how the fire was less like a wall and more like a flapping curtain. And she'd talk about how it wasn't hot, but windy. And she'd talk about the soot-colored sailor in the famous Life photograph, an unconscious, barefoot girl draped across his arms like a bride. That sailor all the newspapers called an angel dispatched from heaven. Well, yes, she'd say, I did see him that night. Before it. Hard man not to notice, let me be honest, but I wasn't a slouch then either. I swished by him in my latest red dress. I was thin then, if you can believe it, still hippie but thin, maybe even a little pretty in a certain light, and yes, sailor boy winked at me. And Herb would shout across the table, because even then it was a performance and they were still in cahoots. Everything she says is true. Pretty? Hell with pretty. Beautiful. Beautiful then, beautiful now, my Rosie. I wanted to break the Jackar's neck, but Rosie said, let him stare, it's patriotic. And Rosalie, whispering, after he left that girl on the sidewalk, that sailor went back inside. And Herb, poor kid, died of his burns 2 days later at Boston City. Herb Swanson was a dentist, everybody's favorite dentist. In his line, he needed a reputation for telling a decent story. Rosalie didn't need stories any more than she needed these interminable dinner parties Herb loved so much. Yet there was something, wasn't there, even for her, about that fire? Maybe it was that sailor's famous cockeyed, confident face, an unshaped face, an unravaged face. In any case, something happened when Rosalie joined in. It was as if she'd actually known it. It was as if that dead boy was more to her than just a picture she'd seen so many years ago in a magazine, because none of it was ever true. The coconut grove didn't happen to them. She never saw that sailor before or after, and neither had Herb. There was no Star-Spangled Banner, at least not in their ears. Herb read that somewhere. Herb read everything somewhere. As for the sober facts, they were these. They were at the club that night. That was whole truth. But Herb's stomach was acting up, and this time it was more than a bad case of gas. They left an hour before the fire. Saved by indigestion. What kind of story would that make? One-shot laugher. Not the kind you tell and tell again. And beyond this, it was not the kind of story that gave you the incontestable authority of the messenger, and only I am escaped to tell thee. Anyway, 20, 30, 40 years on, who's going to know or care? The whole thing was harmless table talk. And if you think about it, in a way they had escaped, hadn't they? They just didn't know that's what they were doing when they retrieved their coats from the hat-check Sweetie. She didn't survive. She was from Malden, engaged, one of the last bodies recovered, and marched out into the chill and burr of an ordinary Boston November night. Why split hairs? Escaping's escaping. Rosalie began to play along more intensely. Her eyes would get bleary. She'd talk with her fork suspended near her mouth as if something crucial to understanding everything had only then just crossed her mind. Everybody would stop chewing and listen, like a horde, except that nobody was moving in the same direction. See? Had people moved in the same direction, maybe it would have been different. See? What you have to understand is that it wasn't the heat or the flames or even the dread smoke. It was how the people... And then Rosalie would pause and take a breath, and the fork still up in the air by her ear. I'm not saying I blame them. No. God, no. I love them. How could I not love them? And somehow her saying this was worse than the melting walls and the charred bodies and the unopenable doors or even the useless, desperate screams, which she never talked about but were always there in her voice. Herb knew how many fire departments responded to the alarm. Trucks as far as New Bedford roared to Boston. Herb knew the score of the Boston College Holy Cross game, BC 12, Holy Cross 55, and he knew how many young and virile lives were saved by that humiliation because Boston College called off the victory party for that night in the Grove's Melody Lounge. He knew the name of the last Buck Jones picture, Forbidden Trail, when Buck, playing a cowhand, not only saves Mary and her mother from the villain Mr. Coffin, he also rescues a man from a burning cabin, and all this before being unjustly accused of arson and murder himself. But Herb Swanson had no talent for putting people inside that club, and the truth is that he began to become a little frightened by his wife. The last thing Rosalie cared about was hoodwinking anybody about what she did or didn't see one night in 1942. And yet when she got started in about things like fingernails tearing the flesh off the shoulders, it was as though she couldn't stop. I don't blame them, she'd say. I really don't. Clawing each other, even husbands and wives. And Herb would watch anxiously, fidgeting, waiting for an opening and a chance to recapture the story and bring it back to the busboy, Stanley Tomaszewski, in the interview he did with the Globe on the 30th anniversary of the fire in '72, when he said he prays for the souls of those innocents every day and often visits their graves, the ones that are here in Massachusetts. He told that reporter that the movie star was buried too far away, but even so, he always wanted to make that trip out to California. There's your human interest. Stanley Tomaszewski, guilty and prostrate before the headstones. Because it was almost as though Rosalie, even though she always denied it, judged people for trying to save themselves, which was wrong and terrible and not at all the point. The point was glory. The point was redemption. Think of all the good that came out of that fire. Municipal solidarity, nationwide sympathy and understanding, new fire codes for every public building in the United States, pivotal advancements in emergency medicine and response. And there's a night, isn't there, when Rosalie stares at Herb and there's nobody else in the room, even though they're having dinner with the Selvins and Tony Bickelman and his latest wife Maureen, and they're all sitting right there. Not their fault. Such rage, Rosalie says. Not their fault. There's nobody else in the room, and Herb's watching her. And he tries not to listen. And he vows to himself he'll never bring any of this up again, ever. He even goes one further and promises himself that one of these days he'll come clean, which after all these years would make a good story in itself. It never happened, folks. We weren't there. My friends, let me be frank, the long and the short of it was, Pause, drumroll, Pepto-Bismol. I stand before you a prevaricator. And he can hear Harvey Salvin saying, for Christ's sake, Herb, it's a story. And Tony Bickelman, and I wasn't shot at Anzio either. Shot at, but not shot. I always say shot, what's the difference? I could have been, couldn't I have been? Around the middle of the 1980s, not long ago after he retired, Herb did stop telling the story, at least in public. And when he stopped, Rosalie stopped. She never initiated it. She only carried it places it wasn't supposed to go. Herb in his chair in the den, looking out at the garden, and Rosalie on the patio reading, slowly turning pages, or not turning pages. The woman could spend 5 minutes on the same page, and still the ceiling ignites and the flames spread across the walls, and he tries to run, and he can't. Herb flings himself against the crowd, elbows cocked like an offensive lineman, trying to use his bulk to plow forward. He stumbles, shouting absurdly, make way, I'm a doctor," while Rosalie remains behind at their table. Rosalie sips her scotch. She recrosses her legs. She rubs the clean white tablecloth with her palm. After he stopped telling the Coconut Grove out loud, this is the part that became most alarming. This is what made Herb try to banish those two words from his brain, the same way the city of Boston forbade them from the commercial register. Rosalie serene, while he and everybody else in the place, not in his dreams, in the morning, in the den, in his chair, awake. And when she died, it all got more vivid, the specter of her sitting and watching. She left the same way. That morning, she'd been talking about craving fresh cucumber salad. When was the last time I had cucumber salad? Mount of Gertz in the 50s? As she napped in the guest room with her clothes on, a stroke took her away on a Monday afternoon. It wasn't that he hadn't known her. He had. And it wasn't that she hadn't loved him. She had, in her way. And she'd always been Rosie, always the girl in the red dress who got the twice over from sailors and sauced it right back. Still, she always held herself not alone, apart. And maybe this is why people craved her soul attention. When the kids were little, and even after they'd gone away, they were still always trying to get their mother away from her in order to be listened to beg advice, to confess. They didn't want Herb's big-heartedness, his hugs, his compassion. Mom, I shoplifted. Mom, I'm strung out. Mom, I'm getting divorced. Mom, I'm broke again. Mom, I'm tired. I can't figure out why I'm so tired all the time. And she'd stare back at them as if they were strangers. No answers or empathy or even comfort, but something. What did you give? What? Tell me. Talk to me, Ro. I'll listen. Herb in his chair by the window overlooking her azaleas, the glare of the sun white now against the glass. A frenzied waiter douses a blazing tinsel palm tree with seltzer water, and Rosalie laughs, raises a long, thin finger slowly to her lips, and breathes. Let it come, Herb. Just let it come. Thank you.
That's great, Peter. Thank you. I have the galleys of my book because it's not out yet, and I actually there's one little section of it that was published as a short story, but otherwise I've never read any of this out loud except to myself, probably a lot. So I'm just going to read a very little bit from near the beginning, and I'm going to read two little parts because the novel follows two different women. It goes back and forth between their stories, and the first one, I'll just read the first one. I won't explain too much since it's the beginning. I shouldn't have to explain. And then I'll read a little from heroine number 2, who's the real heroine, the second one. She stepped out of the plane and over the accordion hinge of the walkway to continue up the tunneled ramp. One always felt altered after a flight. There was the pleasant fatigue of no sleep and one's nerves closer to the surface, as if a layer of self had peeled off and gotten lost in transit. The change was only on the surface, but the surface was where one encountered the world. Her surface was ready for the new things that would happen in this new place, ready for anything different from what she'd known. There was a soggy tobacco smell at the gate and loose rugs with long rolls no one had bothered to smooth out. She stood in a line of crumpled people holding their carry-ons and inching forward to wooden tables where clerks slowly stamped passport books after a sliding look from the picture to the face. She was finally away. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt the expansion, the air humid, the door opening, dawn light reflected off a hammered linoleum floor as she descended an old-fashioned staircase to the black carousel, empty of baggage. There was a long row of bureau de change, with one short counter after another empty, and behind them a large plate glass window with palm trees being eaten by a white sky. Lackadaisical drivers were leaning on the hoods of their cars, half glancing around for a fare. Dark-haired men strolled in short-sleeved shirts. Women in thin dresses moved slowly. Everything mercifully said, "This is not home." First time she saw him, he flew. They were in Lana's driveway unloading alabaster lamps she'd had copied on Biashara Street when a white Toyota truck pulled up and a young man with shoulder-length hair opened the door. He leapt over the roof of the truck and landed in a bowl of dust. Lana gave him a big greeting, embracing him as an old friend, as she embraced everyone. She stepped back to study him, hands on his shoulders. He had on a dirty white hat with a zebra band around the crown. "Nice," she said, flicking the brim. "Jane, come meet Harry." Jane set down her crate. "Harry, Jane," said Lana. "Jane, Harry." "Cheers," Harry said in a flat tone. His chin drew in and he regarded Jane with a strange stoniness, as if she were an intruder who ought to explain herself. The impulse to explain herself was an urge Jane Wood struggled to ignore, so getting a look like that unnerved her. At least that was how she explained the unnerved feeling. "My friend from America," Lana said. She looked back and forth between them. Her bright gaze took in things quickly and let them go just as fast. Harry leaned forward and kissed Jane's cheek, surprising her. "Karibu," he said. The phone rang inside the cottage, and Lana dove to get it, swerving past the crates crowding the foyer. "We're going for sundowners," she called over her shoulder. "You must come." With Lana, there was always a must. A short time later, Jane found herself crammed in the back seat of a dented station wagon, driven by a paint-spattered neighbor of Lana's named Yuri. They were headed to the top of the Ngong Hills. And this section is called Esther. I sit among the girls in the shade of a tree not so far above my head. It is peaceful with their voices in the air talking quietly. It might be birdsong for all I understand or care. I think I will never be close to anyone again. We are just now supposed to be drawing pictures of things we would like to forget. You can see why this is strange. We must think, in order to draw them, about those terrible things we would rather remove from our minds. We are told that drawing such things will help us remove them. Instead, I am drawing the tree past the workshed toward the field. It has a curved trunk and resembles a woman twisting to look over her shoulder. Today I woke with a pressure on my eyes, pulling my forehead. I thought, perhaps I am getting a cold. Maybe I am. My mind is uneasy. Since being away, I am used to my thoughts being disrupted. They have cracks in them. I remember in a soft way, as in the distance, how it was to be whole. Nothing. It was like nothing. You just had wholeness, you did not feel it. I would not have known it was there if I had not become as I am now. It has offered me a perspective. It is interesting how one can understand a way that one was only after one is another way. Beside me, the girls' heads are bent close to the paper. They use ballpoint pens and pencils, which are better if you want to erase. Red pencils are often used for the blood and the bullets. At night, the bullets were red. Holly is beside me. She leans on a cardboard cracker box. She has drawn a house with a thatched roof and a doorway, her house. Soon she will add men with pangas, a chair on fire, and her lute broken on the ground. She was practicing music when she was taken. Holly is from the county near Ongonko, not from the town like me. I am from Lira town, which is not far, just a day's walk. Past the picnic bench near the shop, the boys are together there drawing. I see that one, Simon, with them. His back is to me with his bad legs straight out. When he was shot, the bullet was near the bone, so his knee is not so good. He swings his foot around when he walks instead of stepping straight. The scar looks like a crack in a window with jagged lines coming out from a shiny pink center against his dark skin. The scars on us are not straight. Simon is good at drawing, so his drawings are tacked up in a bicycle repair. A high chain link fence follows two signs of the property here, and there's a wooden fence with pieces fallen out of it along the driveway. The playing field has no fence, but one side goes beside a marsh. We are not fenced in. Here is not a prison, and still we are not permitted to leave. I am not so good at drawing. I would rather look at a thing made in nature. I don't finish drawing that tree. Our camp is called Kiryandongo Rehabilitation Center, and we are, during the dry season, a dusty circle cleared in the middle of tangled bush a little ways off the Gulu Road. We have a parking area for cars. One belongs to Charles, and the truck fetches food and supplies. The van is to transport children, but it is broken at this time and has not been used since I have been here. Holly is in the upper bunk beside me. She has decorated her area. From the ceiling strings dangle empty boxes of close-up toothpaste or fortified protein, an eye drop bottle, a box of Band-Aids. I have no decoration. Underneath Holly is May, who is pregnant, due in a month. Her parents do not accept the child coming and have not visited May. At Kiryandongo, we are all united by a thing that also divides us from others. We look at each other and know what we have been through. We also look away for the same reason. Since my return, I meet new challenges of the mind. I have decided to forget everything that happened to me there, and so look forward to the remainder of my life. I am not so old, 16. My life could still be long. We studied the Greeks in school, and they had people called rhapsodes who memorized long stories and recited them the way you would a song. The long poems were epics. At banquets or by pools, people would sit eating grapes and drinking from goblets and listen to the rhapsodes sing. It was not a song with music, but the rhapsodes still sang. They sang of heroes and of journeys. When they ask us to speak, I cannot find the words. What I have inside is for me to look at alone. Who else can know it? Not anyone. I cannot say it out loud. How can one tell a story so full of shame? I listen to the others talk and understand how they struggle. We knew the same things. I stay apart to make peace with it inside myself, if I am able. With the rebels, I learned that inside is where it most matters, in any case. I am one of the abducted children. Did I tell you my name? I am Esther Akela.